Welcome to today's training session on qualitative data analysis. My name is Gilbert, and I'll be guiding you through this session and getting to understand the key aspects and details pertaining to qualitative data analysis. By the end of this training, you will have a clear understanding of the various qualitative data analysis methods, the steps involved in conducting a qualitative analysis. Let's get started. Qualitative data analysis involves examining non-numerical data to understand concepts, opinions, or experiences. Unlike quantitative data analysis, which focuses on numbers and statistical relationships, qualitative data analysis focuses on understanding the underlying meanings and patterns in the data. This type of analysis is crucial in fields such as sociology, anthropology, education, and healthcare, and all the other humanities and social sciences studies you can think of, even in business research. So it's very crucial for you to understand these, the various details associated with qualitative data analysis, because it helps you to understand human behavior and experiences in different scenarios. So today we'll be going through the various qualitative data analysis examples and explanations, getting to understand each and every one of them. So there are about 6 types of qualitative data analysis, which includes thematic analysis, grounded theory, content analysis, narrative analysis, discourse analysis, and framework analysis. So we'll go through each and every one of these types of qualitative analysis, get to understand them, get to understand the advantages and disadvantages, and the different types of studies that are commonly engaged in those types of analysis. But what I want you to understand is that if your study is not involved in any of the types, it doesn't mean that you don't use qualitative data analysis in those studies. They are just examples. So as I mentioned earlier, it's important for you to understand that qualitative data analysis are usually used in all kinds of disciplines, including humanities, development, social sciences, business research, and even in engineering studies. So you realize that all these types of analysis are commonly used in any academic discipline, or even in various organizational settings. So in this case, I'm going to take you to the first type of qualitative data analysis, which is thematic data analysis. Thematic data analysis is quite common. It is actually the most used type of qualitative data analysis, and it is crucial that we get to understand its various nuances, what it is all about, and etc. So thematic analysis is a method for identifying and analyzing and reporting patterns, themes within data. It minimally organizes and describes your data set in detail. However, it is also frequently goes further than interpreting various aspects of the research topic. So it is at least about 6 steps that I will just outline. The 6 steps of thematic data analysis involve familiarization, coding, searching for themes, reviewing themes, defining and naming themes, and then finally producing the report. So it's crucial for you to understand each and every one of these steps. In various circumstances or scenarios, you'd find that people nowadays, they use various technologies to ensure that these processes are clear. But that's a subject and story for another day. Today, I want you to understand these steps as they are. When you have gathered your data or your recordings, obviously the first thing you do is you transcribe the data. This is where we get to the first step, which is familiarization. You transcribe the data, you read the data, you read your transcriptions, and you reread them again, so that you get to understand the key initial ideas. And then from then, you go into coding, which is the second step, whereby you generate initial codes, which are systematically across the entire data set. You collect the data that is relevant to each and every code. What do I mean by saying coding? It might happen that in your data there are several key emerging words or aspects, like for example security or family relations or family expectations. Those are the key codes that you can utilize to see how is your what are the consistent ideas that are emerging from your data. And then the third aspect, which is searching for the themes. After collecting your codes, after collecting your codes, you then turn them into potential themes and gathering all the relevant data for each potential theme. And then from there, you then start reviewing your themes. This is checking if the themes work in relation to the coded extracts and the entire data set, and generating the thematic map of the analysis. But in doing all this, what I would recommend is that let your study objectives or your research questions guide you into developing these themes, because whatever data you're going to produce or whatever results you're going to present, they are answering or they are addressing the key objectives of the study. And then we go to the fifth step, which is defining and naming the themes. So the ongoing analysis, you have to refine the specifics of each theme and the overall story of that your analysis is supposed to tell. You generate clear definitions and names of each theme. As I mentioned earlier, you have to be guided by your objectives, so that whatever you are developing responds or directly answer the key objectives of your study. And then the final step in thematic analysis is producing the report. The final opportunity for the analysis, whereby you have to make a relevant or necessary selection of vivid, compelling extract example. Final analysis of selected extracts relating back to the analysis of the research question, the literature, and producing a scholarly report. This is very crucial for you to understand in thematic analysis. The second qualitative data analysis we need to understand is the grounded theory. A grounded theory is a systematic methodology that involves the construction of theories through methodological gathering and analysis of data. It is particularly useful for developing new theories grounded in the data that has been collected. So there are basically 6 steps as well, just like in thematic analysis. So these 6 steps, they include obviously data collection, open coding, axial coding, selective coding, theoretical sampling, and the theory development, which is the last stage. Starting with the data collection. Collecting data that is suitable for grounded theory, you need to go through various methods, such as interviews, observations, and document analysis. And just as in thematic analysis, any of the data that you gather, either by interviews, observations, focus groups, or document analysis, is very crucial in developing a grounded theory analysis process. And then the second aspect is breaking down the data into discrete parts, closely examining and comparing them for similarities and differences. So obviously now, because you want to develop a theory, you need to establish what are the similarities in the existing information, and then what are the differences, so that by the time you come to develop your own theory, you know the missing parts, or you know the nuances that are not appearing in either of the information that is existing. And so that's the relevance of open coding. And then when you come to the third aspect, which is axial coding, the purpose is to ensure that you reassemble the data in new ways by establishing connections between the categories. So the whole purpose of this section or of this step is to ensure that you are reorganizing the information in your own peculiar or in your own particular way. You show the relevant connections that are existing between the categories that you have established earlier during open coding. And then the third aspect is selective coding. This is whereby you begin to identify the core categories and systematically relating each and every category that you have identified. So this is very crucial and this is very important because you get to understand, you get to see everything going stage by stage. And then the fifth aspect, which is theoretical sampling, you now begin to collect additional data to refine and saturate the categories. So having organized your information or having categorized your data in sections, which shows that which reflect the similarities, the differences, and then the connections between the various categories, you then now start engaging into your theoretical sampling, whereby you begin to collect relevant additional data that will help you to saturate the categories. In this case, obviously, what you are trying to do is make sure that your new categories that you are developing are well saturated to show that this is relevant info, to show that this is a relevant gap your study is attempting to cover. And then the final aspect, which is theory development in grounded theory, is whereby you integrate and refine the categories to form a coherent theory. So these are the processes that help you to define and establish a clear grounded theory or as a qualitative data analysis. So for example, one can look at a study whereby you're trying to establish coping strategies of nurses in high stress environments, and then researchers might develop a theory on how social support networks and personal resilience contribute to job satisfaction and retention in those environments. So I hope this helps for us to understand what grounded theory is all about. So the third qualitative data analysis is content analysis. So what is content analysis? Content analysis is a research technique for making replicable and valid inferences by interpreting and coding textual material, by systematically evaluating texts, documents, oral communication, and graphics. Qualitative data can be converted into quantitative data. But in this case, we are simply focusing on the qualitative aspect. What happens when we are engaging in content analysis? Others, they call it thematic content analysis, but in this case, we are just going to stick to content analysis. It has 4 steps that are crucial and that are important for you to understand. Obviously, the first step is preparation. The second step is coding. The third step in content analysis is categorizing. And the fourth step in content analysis is interpretation. So these 4 steps are very crucial for you to understand. So we get to understand the very first step, which is defining the content to be analyzed and the context of the study. It's very important when you are engaging in content analysis for you to understand what is it that you are looking at, what is it that you intend to explore, what is it that you seek to understand. So that alone will help you to define your content, and it will help you to establish the specific context that you need to interpret. And from there, you get to coding. And coding, in this case, you are creating categories and coding the data accordingly. So when you create a category, for example, you are talking about, let's say you are looking at climate change. You can create a category on climate activism. You can create a category on climate denial. You can create a category on climate policies. And those help you to understand the different frequencies that are emerging in terms of the content or in terms of the information that you are coding or analyzing. And the third aspect is categorizing. You group similar codes together in broader categories. So, as I gave an example of climate change, all of these different themes or all of these different codes like climate activism and climate, you can categorize them in a broader theme, which might be climate change. And if there is another category that you are looking at or that you are focusing on, it might be climate change and peace. Then you can also create another category which focuses on peace on its own. And you start creating different codes along those lines. So it's very important for you to understand how you categorize your codes. And then the fourth and final aspect, which is the interpretation of data in content analysis. The main aspect is to analyze the frequency and the context of codes to draw conclusions. In as much as you might have a well-organized presentation which might look like thematic, the main goal here is to analyze the frequency, the consistency of certain information. In any of your data or in any of your information that you have been reviewing or that you have been preparing, reflecting on, what are the consistent details? What are the consistent ideas and arguments? And what do that kind of information mean in this case? So you should be able to provide a clear understanding of the frequency and the sentiment of each category of codes that you have identified. So that being said, this basically gives us an understanding of what content analysis involves and what we should understand and look at when utilizing content analysis in our study. Then we go to the next aspect. So another type of qualitative data analysis is narrative analysis. This is another interesting type of qualitative data analysis that we need to understand. Narrative analysis, it focuses on the stories told by individuals and examines the ways in which the narratives are constructed and the meanings they convey. It is particularly useful in understanding individual experiences and personal accounts. So you would realize that narrative analysis is usually used in studies that are focusing mainly on ethnography. So it might be your historical studies, it might be your cultural studies, it might be your social studies, whereby you need to provide specific narratives and outline what these narratives mean, outline how these narratives should be interpreted. So there are mainly 4 steps in narrative analysis. The first step is identifying the narratives. The second step is analyzing the structure of the narratives. The third step is content analysis. And then the fourth step is contextual analysis. So this is what makes up a narrative analysis. So getting to understand the first step, that is identifying the narratives. You select narratives or stories within the data. When you have done your interviews or when you have done your surveys or even when you have looked at the different historical texts, the main important aspect is to identify the narratives that respond to your objectives, the narratives that are peculiar or that are critical to your specific objectives or to your specific research questions. Once you have identified those, then you go to the second step, which is analyzing the structure. This is whereby you examine the structure of the narratives, such as the plot, the characters, and the settings. So this is very important to understand. In this case, obviously, you need to identify where did the story or within the narrative happened, what was involved or who was involved, and what were the conditions that led to such kind of activities. So obviously, if you are looking at a historical study, you might be looking at issues pertaining to war, you might be looking at issues pertaining to the apartheid and all kinds of aspects that might be involved in that. So you need to be able to establish what was the plot, who were the characters involved, and what were in what settings were all these kind of things happening. And then the third and important step again is the content analysis. This is whereby you interpret the content of the narratives to understand the underlying themes and messages. So it might be similar to the content analysis when you get to this step, but what is crucial, especially in a narrative analysis, you need to understand the themes that are being brought out by either the individual, if it's in ethnography, or by individuals who are involved maybe in the ethnographic study, or if it's a broader qualitative study whereby you have different participants, you need to understand the type of stories that are being told. What are the themes that are emerging in these stories? And what are the key messages that they are portraying? What is crucial? It might be, for instance, if you are your study is looking at land, it might involve the key messages pertaining to land. What are those messages which are being brought forward? And then the final step is the contextual analysis. In this contextual analysis, your interest is to consider the context in which the narratives are told, including the social context, the cultural context, and the historical context. So it's very crucial in a narrative analysis to also provide a contextual analysis, because what is considered important in South Africa might not be considered important in Zimbabwe. It might not be considered important in Mozambique. So context is very crucial in a narrative analysis, because the experiences of people in KZN might be different during apartheid, might be different from the experiences of people in Gauteng. Yes, there might be similar issues here and there, but the narratives and the stories might be a bit different. So that is very crucial to understand when you're engaging in a narrative analysis. These are the kind of aspects you are intending or you intend to bring out. So in any study or in any study that you conduct and you use narrative analysis, it's very crucial to understand the peculiarities or the contextual issues that surrounds it. So obviously, when you have understood the narrative analysis, we now need to understand another type of qualitative data analysis, which is discourse analysis. This is a bit interesting, and it's utilized in different types of studies. It might be linguistics, it might be political studies, it might be policy studies. It's widely used in different studies. But what is discourse analysis? Discourse analysis examines how language is used in texts and contexts, focusing on the ways in which language constructs social realities and power relations. It analyzes both the content and the structure of communication. So in discourse analysis, there are also 4 critical steps that if you master them, if you understand them, it will help you in developing or in utilizing discourse analysis in your study, in the event that you are using discourse analysis. The first step is text selection. The second step is context consideration. The third step is language analysis. And the fourth step is interpretation. Now that we have understood that there are 4 steps in discourse analysis, let's get to understand each and every step. With text selection, you are choosing the texts or discourses to be analyzed. So this is obviously the first critical step that you need to do, having your relevant data or having compiled your relevant data. You need to choose the text and the discourse you intend to analyze. So obviously these are guided by objectives or your research questions. They help you to select which kind of text am I going to involve, what exactly am I looking at, what kind of discourse do I need to understand. And then the second step is context consideration, understanding the social, cultural, and historical context of the discourse. Obviously, in this case, the critical aspects is to establish which social group am I looking at, and which cultural focus is my study engaging. And if it's a historical, if it is a historical context, you also need to establish which time period am I looking at, because one of the critical aspects is that discourses evolve and discourses might differ depending on the social environment, depending on the cultural environment, and depending on the historical time period. In any case, if it happens that there were political speeches that were made during the apartheid, those political speeches might be might have a similar tone or might have a similar discourse. But also you need to understand that if it's political speeches made during apartheid, were they made by the government or were they made by the revolutionary organizations? So obviously, if they were made by the government, you find that they have a particular narrative that they were trying to push, and while the revolutionary parties like the ANC and other organizations were pushing a particular narrative. So that's very important for you to establish, because each and every context brings out a different discourse altogether. So it's crucial for you to establish and consider which context am I looking at, because that helps to shape the discourse you want to analyze. And then the third aspect is the language analysis. In language analysis, you are analyzing the language, including vocabulary, grammar, and the rhetorical devices that might have been used or that might be used in a particular speech or in a particular presentation that you are analyzing, or even in a particular policy document. What are the kind of words which are being used? What are the kinds of narratives, or what are the kinds of rhetoric being used? If you are to understand maybe what would have been the kind of a language or the kind of discourse which was being used either during apartheid or being used by Hitler in his campaigns and all kinds of things. So those propaganda or that kind of language, that kind of vocabulary, that kind of grammar is very crucial to understand what kind of discourse was being pushed or what kind of ideas were being presented. So that's the whole purpose of the language analysis. You need to look at how certain information was disseminated, what kind of words, how were the words presented, the grammatical format, the rhetorical information that was being brought out. So this helps you to get to the interpretation, which is the fourth aspect, whereby you are interpreting how language constructs and meanings and the power dynamics in those language constructs. The power dynamics are being played in the information that was being disseminated. So just one critical example that I've been using all along is that whenever you are engaging in a discourse analysis of political speeches, what you need to understand is explore how politicians are using the language to frame the policy issues, to persuade their audience, and to assert their authority. So this is very important, because obviously the way a dictator can present or can frame their policy issues, persuade their audiences, and assert their authority is different from a presidential candidate or from a president or from any politician who is a Democrat. So there are two different discourses that are presented there. So it's very crucial for you to understand what discourse analysis is all about and how can you utilize it in your study, depending on whether you are doing political studies, linguistics, policy studies, and so forth. This takes us to the next type of qualitative analysis that we are going to look at, which is the framework analysis. And this will be the last analysis we are looking at. So Framework analysis is the sixth qualitative data analysis that I'm talking about today. And what is framework analysis? What does it do? What does it talk about? What is it all about? Framework analysis involves a systematic approach to qualitative data analysis using a structured matrix. It is particularly useful for policy research and other applied fields where a structured approach is beneficial. And one of those I can actually mention is that framework analysis is very useful in media studies. It is commonly and quietly used there. And our very own Dr. Mringa is an expert in framework analysis. There are 5 steps that are involved in framework analysis. The first one is familiarization. The second one is identifying a thematic framework. The third one is indexing. The fourth one is charting. The fifth one is mapping and interpretation. So from these fifth, let's get right into understanding the first step, which is familiarization. Whenever you've gathered your data, it might be your transcripts or even your news articles or anything. What you need to do is immerse yourself in that data by reading the transcripts or the notes. Get to understand the key details, get to understand the various aspects that are being brought about in that study. And when you have done that, the second you get into the second aspect, which is identifying a thematic framework. When identifying the thematic framework, you develop codes for the framework based on the key themes and the concepts. It's similar to when we explained what happens when you are doing thematic analysis. So obviously, before you start framing, the key aspects is to develop identify the key themes, code them, and establish those key themes, the key concepts, and put them together. And then you do what we call indexing. That is applying the coding framework to the data. And then you get to the next step, which is charting. That is summarizing the data by themes in a matrix. So you develop a matrix table whereby you begin to chart or presenting like the charts that we all know. We know that what a chart is all about. So that's what you begin to do. You start organizing your themes in a matrix so that it becomes easier to follow that this theme is identifying, it presents these different kinds of views and perspectives. It presents these different kinds of ideas and arguments that are existing in this particular article or that are existing in this particular set of data. And then the last thing is mapping and interpretation. Then this would involve analyzing the data within the matrix to identify patterns and draw conclusions. So for example, in a study evaluating the implementation of a healthy policy framework, framework analysis might involve coding interview data based on themes such as policy awareness, implementation challenges, and outcomes, and then mapping these themes to assess the policy's effectiveness. So you realize that from the details that I have just explained, if we are to follow all these guidelines and steps, it will be easier for you to carry out a framework analysis. And it will also be easier for you to carry any of the different qualitative data analysis examples I've just given you and explained. But not to say that these 6 are the only qualitative data analysis types that are there. There might be others, there might be many more, which you can look at and which you can get to understand. But for now, these are the only 6 that we have presented that are common and that are widely used. And getting to understand these is very important. It will be very helpful for you. And there are different advantages and disadvantages of each and every type. But I'm not going to go into detail on this because we have already developed an ebook and a toolkit that can explain some of these key details. And it's quite detailed to help you understand each and every type of qualitative data analysis that is there. It also outlines the key steps that you can follow and unpack some of the and simplify some of the issues that might be confusing you in your data analysis process. So get hold of a copy. The details are already available on the screen, and and some of the details are also available on our website. So we'd encourage you to visit it and see the outlines. For any other information, don't hesitate to email us, don't hesitate to call us, don't hesitate to engage with us. And thank you very much for joining us in today's workshop. We are going into questions and answers, and please, let's engage and feel free to ask any questions pertaining to what we have just presented. Yes, you can ask other different questions, but we encourage you to ask questions that are specifically focusing on today's workshop. That will be helpful so that we don't get to confuse others who are joining us for the first time. If you have other separate questions, please do contact us after the session or do email us, and we'll call you right back.